straight out of my bookshelves today to bring to you 3 fantastic audiobook recommendations that I think are really worth your time. Today we will be talking about Michelle Obama's Becoming, something that has been on everybody's reading list. I will also give you my thoughts on Modern Romance by Aziz Ansari, which I recently started reading and I'm currently enjoying. And I will also talk to you about the third book, which is Octavia E. Butler's Kindred, which is a neo-slave narrative written in the manner of science fiction. Let's start off with Octavia E. Butler's Kindred. This is a book that I read at the start of this year when I just got my Audible subscription, and it was $800 on Amazon, and I decided to buy it when it became an audiobook because it was just 200 rupees a month for an audiobook, so it gives you a lot of room because you're actually spending just 200 and getting a book that's actually worth 800, but you're listening to it instead. So it was definitely a good deal. And listening to the audiobook, it was quite a harrowing experience because this is based on slavery, African American slavery. So what happens is, in the book you have Dana, who is the protagonist, and she has the ability to time travel. So Octavia Butler gets into the whole idea of time travel without getting into the technicalities of it or the scientific aspects. She just talks about how one day Dana is going through her bookshelves, doing something mundane, and then bam, she just disappears and she goes back in time and she's finding herself in a slave plantation in 1800 something. So she was in 1976, but then she goes back in time 100 years and she finds herself in antebellum South in one of the states. She meets one of her ancestors in the form of a young boy called Rufus. So she's in this cabin, a slave cabin, and this boy is here, and apparently he channeled her, and every time he gets hurt or something bad happens to him, she comes as his sort of guardian, and she's there to sort of guide him, and she ends up spending some days in that slave plantation. So she has to sort of look out for her own ancestor, otherwise she won't be born technically, if you look at it that way. So it's pretty crazy. It plays around with time, and you can really see how she has to sort of be there for this boy throughout his life growing up, and he turns out to become a slave holder himself. So he becomes a slave master. Yeah, so you can see that what happens is when you're traveling back in time, you age faster. So when you come back, you have actually only been away for like a few minutes or a few hours or even a couple of days if you've spent 10 years back in the South. So this whole time thing is really interesting. And what happens is she's married to a white man, so he also ends up going back in time. And it really ends up having repercussions on their marriage and sort of strains the relationship as well. And then because he's white and he finds himself in the slave South, they look at him as a respectable being, and she, because of her color, she's taken for granted to be slave, even though she's actually a free person. So there are a lot of dynamics, really interesting piece of fiction. I have been wanting to read this because it is the first work of science fiction that was written keeping in mind a very integral part of African American history, such as slavery. So I really enjoyed reading this, and I would highly recommend it to anybody who's interested in American or African American literature. Definitely go check the audiobook out. It's narrated beautifully, and at the same time, if you couldn't handle 12 years a slave, then I don't recommend you read the audiobook. But anyway, those are my thoughts on Kindred. The second book I'm going to talk to you about is Michelle Obama's Becoming, which is a memoir that she wrote very recently and released. And this has been on New York Times bestselling list for a really long time. She's like a natural writer. She's very talented. She divided her memoir into 3 different parts. So you have Becoming Me, Becoming Us, and finally Becoming More. In Becoming Me, the first part of her memoir, she talks about her experiences growing up and being an adolescent, and then going to university and sort of taking the career path that she chose, and how at 25, 26, she's not really there yet. She hasn't figured out her career, and she feels that she needs to be doing something that is more fulfilling, and she decides to get into social work. And then before that, she ends up meeting Barack Obama. So he comes to her office one day as an eager intern, and then they're both lawyers. So she's given the job of giving him a tour and introducing him to important, stakeholders and stuff. And they fall in love, and then they go on several dates, and you get all the details about her personal life in this memoir. And it also omits the level of distance between the author and the reader, because you're actually listening to the book narrated by the author herself. So it's like there's this feeling that you're actually sitting in front of this person while they tell you about their lives. So it's very personal. Like you can, feel for the author, And she also talks about marriage, the challenges they faced, the fact that they had to go to couple counseling and things got really bad. Her experiences with in vitro fertilization, and those are the moments of the novel where you really feel like crying, especially if you're listening to the audiobook, because the emotion in her voice is so real. She elevates the status of motherhood to something else. So I highly recommend reading this book if you are looking at getting the idea of Michelle Obama not just as a public figure, but as a human being, because it talks about her role as a wife, as a mother, as a daughter, as a first lady, and so much more. She is a really good writer with weaves wonderful sentences into her work. Really nice listening to Michelle Obama's audiobook. The next book I'm talking about is Modern Romance by Aziz Ansari. I just started listening to it. If you don't know who Aziz Ansari is, he started a Netflix show recently called Master of None. He is an Indian American. So I don't know much about him, but the thing is, he wrote Modern Romance, and it's a fact-based, research-based narratives. There's romance and how it was when it was back in the day. So it was really a simple thing at one point. You could end up marrying somebody on your street. You could end up, dating somebody in your neighborhood, and they would end up marrying you ultimately. And things were really simple. People's wants were simple. People's needs in relationships were simple. But over the years, things have changed, and everybody expects to find their soulmate, and there's so much weight on it. And basically, romance has evolved, especially with the fact that there's so much technology and there's a lot of devices out there. So dating has taken its own turn, and it's not as simple as it once used to be. So people have to think about how they're going to text somebody. People have to think about what kind of emails they're going to send. Aziz Ansari, he's a comedian, so he adds a lot of humor to the narrative, even though it's fact-based. It doesn't feel heavy at all, and you get an idea of the state of things, not just in America, but all over the world. And he's done research from different countries, and he's sort of talking about it that way. So yeah, it's turning out to be a pretty interesting audiobook, and I'm hoping to finish it soon. I will also link my article to 5 reasons why I think audiobooks are the best in the description box down below. Please let me know if you have read any of these audiobooks that I mentioned, if there are any audiobooks on your to-read list. If you like this video, please hit the like button. Also subscribe to my channel, and there's a bell icon in the side. Please click on that if you would like to be notified on when I post my next video. And lots of bookish love. I will be back soon with more content. Bye bye.